Summarization is one that you probably know that these tools do a really good job. You can upload a document and then just ask it to summarize, and you can you can provide some detail in the prompt of how much you want it to compress. Say you want a very long document and you just want it to give you a couple of paragraphs. Legal research. So with this one, I wanted to really sort of give some tips. There are obviously people, a lot of you have probably heard about lawyers who've gotten into trouble using ChatGPT, for example, for legal research, where it made up cases, drafting. So complex drafting that lawyers do, whether it's producing a legal brief.
Welcome and thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina and I'll be the moderator for today. Now, to kick things off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Greg Siskind. Greg Siskind is a founding partner of Siskind Susser and has been practicing immigration law since 1990. He is a co-founder of the AI software company Visa Law Ventures. He received his bachelor's degree from Vanderbilt University and his law degree from the University of Chicago. He is the author of several books, including the annually published J1 Visa Guidebook, the American Bar Association Lawyer's Guide to Marketing on the Internet, the I-9 and E-Verify Handbook, the Physician Immigration Handbook, and many more. He has helped in drafting a number of immigration-related pieces of legislation as well, and has testified as an expert in front of the U.S. House of Representatives Immigration Subcommittee. The webinar presentation that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, and once Greg's presentation is complete, he will be taking audience questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like him to answer at the end of the presentation, please feel free to submit them through that Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, here is Greg to discuss AI in law, exploring 30-plus game-changing use cases in 60 minutes.
Okay. So my name is Greg Siskind. I have been using generative AI tools probably not that much longer than all of you, because they've only been available since November 2022. But I have been along the way collecting use cases, ways to use them, that some of which hopefully will be new for you today. The idea is that that this will be fast paced, and the goal is to get through all my slides in the 60 minutes that we have. But basically, I will also preface it saying most of the time I've been using these use cases in ChatGPT or in our company's own product, occasionally Google Gemini. But it's not really that important necessarily which tool you're using. A lot of these should hopefully work well in the various public language models like Perplexity and Claude and Gemini and the assortment of others. So I'll go ahead and get started. The first one I wanted to list because I think that it's a helpful reminder that these tools are language models, and they're really good in a lot of cases at understanding the words and word combinations. So if you, it can be very helpful when you're trying to get feedback on a particular document that you're working on, in a lot of cases, to use the tool. So the way I've styled this presentation is I'll show you a headline as far as a use case. And then I'll either give you a sample prompt or a tip or an example of something that you could do with that in that particular use case scenario. So this is this prompts can be pretty elaborate, or they can be pretty basic as far as what you're asking it to do. But this is one that I use all the time, and I've been using this probably for about 1.5 years already. And it's a fallacy finder. So basically, it's sort of like a good place to start because it'll give you an idea of how you can actually paste something like this in your user window, your prompt window in ChatGPT or whichever tool that you're using. And then also I'll show in brackets what you're going to paste that would be original. the slides have been provided to Nina and should be available to. So don't worry about writing everything down. And don't worry about, you don't have to necessarily take screenshots or get your camera out for these. They should be available to you later. And if for some reason you can't, you just want to email me afterwards, I can always send you the slides as well. So this is the first one, Fallacy Finder. And basically the idea is that you're going to upload a document with your arguments, and you want you want the AI to give you, to be on the other side, basically serving as opposing counsel, essentially, on whatever that you're doing, or whatever you're writing on, but basically to be a critic and give you feedback to help you find problems and things that you're doing. And this is one that I find works quite well. Um, Ideation is sort of the cousin of Fallacy Finder. This is to help you with brainstorming. Um, this is one that is just an example of, you could obviously plug in however you want here, but the idea is that you are just asking it to help you brainstorm ideas for whatever your task is that you're doing. I write I have to tell you, I write a magazine column for the ABA on marketing, and a lot of times I've sort of gotten a little writer's block at the very beginning of coming up with ideas of things to write about, and I will oftentimes use a prompt like this to get me going. And then afterwards, actually, I'll use it to kind of help me formulate bullet points and things like that of subjects that I want to cover. But this is one that ideation is one that probably, if you haven't tried it, it's probably one of the most common use cases. Proofreader. So again, I mentioned that these are language models, ChatGPT, and what they are essentially is they've been trained on millions and millions of web pages, not just in English, but in a lot of different languages. And it is an excellent, it's excellent, not just in proofing for grammar and spelling and that kind of thing for a document that you might be working on, but also just style suggestions. If you are trying to, hit a certain tone in your writing, it can give you suggestions for how to improve. But I use it all the time on something that I'm working on to help me with finding problems in my writing. And it does a good job on that task because, like I said, it's a language model. So if you are, if you're worried about hallucinations, which are, getting false answers and things like that, pure language tasks like this are usually where its biggest strengths are. And I'm going to be showing a couple more of these as we move along. So this is a prompt that you could use for something like that, but basically telling it to fix grammar and spelling mistakes and making suggestions for improving clarity and whatever other kinds of changes that you want it to be looking for when it's proofing a particular document. Word count is also related to this. I have this comes up obviously for lawyers that have to file things in courts where they have page counts or word counts that they have to meet. Oftentimes I'm being told I have to have a limit on my bio for somewhere I'm speaking, or the magazine article I write has a pretty strict 1,200 word limit. In a lot of cases now, as in the past, what I would do is I would write whatever I was going to write, and then I would have to eliminate 300 words, 400 words, whatever the count was. And it was really painful to get to get it to where I wanted. But now I can use this tool for that. And basically, one of the key things that I tell it to do is to keep the same tone and reduce it in a way that keeps the meaning of the article precisely the same, or the meaning of the whatever is being written precisely the same. And what it'll do is it will find a 3-word combination and turn it into 2 words, and it'll do that throughout the document. And a lot of times I'm looking over it and it's like I have no idea where it made changes or how it made changes. It looks like exactly the same article, but it's magically down to the size limit that I want. Practice management consultant is one that I wrote this prompt probably April of last year, and I've used it many times for different tasks. this is an example of a longer prompt for a very specific thing. But the reason why this is so beautiful, this prompt, is that it will give you a pretty thorough analysis on any kind of question that's law practice management related that you might have. And I've used it for helping me come up with policies, helping me come up with marketing techniques, all kinds of things. But this is one that it illustrates sort of different elements of a more complicated prompt. So you're telling it basically at the beginning what your chart asking it to do. Then you're telling it what the length of the document that you want and key things to hit, what kind of formatting that you want. In this case, I want it with bullet points where necessary, what tone you want, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives pretty professional level sound. At least people I've shown it to as far as the responses that I get to that prompt. So this is one I would definitely recommend trying out. Summarization is one that you probably know that these tools do a really good job, and it's another good example of the best use of a language model. But this can be rather simple. You can upload it with ChatGPT or some of these other ones. You can upload a document and then just ask it to summarize, and you can you can provide some detail in the prompt of how much you want it to compress. Say you want a very long document and you just want it to give you a couple of paragraphs, where you can tell it to do a longer one. Keep in mind, some of the language models have what are called token limits. And this basically means just size limits on how much text it can handle. And if you upload a 300-page document, you're not going to probably get a public language model to use it. The technique we use with Visual.ai, our software, and some of the other ones uses, we actually break you upload a large document, it breaks it up into multiple parts. You don't see this. And then it will summarize each part and then put it back together so that you can avoid the token limits. So we didn't invent that idea. There are other companies that do that, but that's how some of these tools are using OpenAI or some of the other language models in the back end, but able to take much longer documents. So that's how they do that. Translation. So again, similar to summarization, this is one of the kind of the sleeper things that it does quite well. I forget how many languages, but it's most of the languages around the world that are available in OpenAI for translation to or from English. And you also, again, can have a fairly simple prompt for this, where you just basically are telling it. But in this case, for translation, you don't have to worry about like how concise or whatever. You're asking for an exact translation. And it does a pretty good job with that. I will tell you that something I'm looking forward to using more is ChatGPT's GPT-4o, the new model that works quite well on a phone. Has pretty close to real-time translation, where you can have a conversation, you say something into it, and it'll immediately translate it verbally for a person that might be listening, and it recognizes the difference between voices. So two people can basically have the phone in between and have a conversation going back and forth. And it does seem to do a pretty good job on the testing that I've done myself and some of the demos that I've seen. I think Meta also has capabilities in that regard that are pretty good. Meta is Facebook, their AI product. Legal research. So with this one, I wanted to really sort of give some tips. There are obviously a lot of you have probably heard about lawyers who've gotten into trouble using ChatGPT, for example, for legal research, where it made up cases and it did all kinds of things. So I could give a long presentation on just that topic, but I did want to give a couple of tips here because Wes and Lexis and Fastcase and our product, which is for immigration law, are in the legal research space, and some of the techniques that are being used to reduce problems are one is that limiting. They use something called retrieval augmented generation, where the answers are only coming from a data set that is specific to that product. So ours, we have 165,000 immigration related documents and cases that all the answers can only come from that set. So it's not ChatGPT will go out into the world and look for things, and if it doesn't find it, it will it'll basically make up an answer. There was a third thing that you can reduce that some of the reason why I said, well, I said use a tool designed for legal research. One of the reasons is the legal research products set their temperature at the lowest level, which means that from a technical point of view, it just means that the words have to be close together when it's coming up with the answers. What that does is it reduces the tendency to be creative, and you're more likely to get an answer that is precise. And it also will tell you it doesn't know when it doesn't have when it's not finding anything, which is precisely what you want. You don't want it making things up when it can't find you a good answer. You want it to say, I don't know. Citations are really critical in legal research. And what you want is to have um, a memo essentially, and then at the end citations that you can. In ours, we have the citation and then a blurb underneath it showing what language that the model was pulling from in the particular document. And then you want to have the ability to link to that. You want to have the ability to click through and see the original document that was cited, and then make the decision for yourself whether it did a good job or not. And so you really have to still be the lawyer with these tools. You have to review the cited work and make sure it stands for what the tool said. Um, so that's legal research, and it's like I said, it's worth trying, but remembering that what their limitations are. But they are great for just asking sort of like spitball questions. You don't have to know keywords. You don't have to know anything. You just ask the question like you were asking a lawyer down the hall, and it usually can figure out what you were looking for. Um, Marketing copy. So this is you can, every firm does different things in the space. I have a couple of prompts that that I've used in my own practice. One was for a press release, and there's a zillions of press releases that are in ChatGPT's data set. So you didn't have to give it that much detail about what a press release should look like or how it should read. It will find press releases to understand what the structure should look like. And instead, really what you want to do is just sort of give it enough details about what it is that you're announcing. Um, Another one is to generate an article for. We send out. There was a big news development this morning in immigration law, and we're actually developing a memo for thousands of people that are in our client database. But this is a prompt that would be an example of one that we might use in our own practice to explain a development to that, and it might be something that we also post on our blog, and you can see the how the problem might look in terms of things that are prioritized, like search engine optimization, keywords, and et cetera on that. But that's this is one that obviously developing marketing copy, a lot of lawyers are already taking advantage of, and it can do quite a good job. Think Twitter posts, think Facebook posts, think LinkedIn posts, as well as client memos, et cetera. Hypothetical generator. So this is one that I've used actually in presentations, but there's all kinds of times when you have to come up with hypotheticals if you're presenting on a CLE program. Is an obvious one. I did one that and I'll show you the prompt that I was used to. It really was helpful. I do an ethics presentation on AI legal ethics, and I wanted to develop short hypotheticals about how generative AI came into play with various legal ethics rules. And this was I think this was the prompt that I used for that. And it did a pretty good job on there of giving me and it had it had access in the model to the ABA model rules, and So it was able to be quite specific, and I had actually didn't have to. It gave me a lot of examples, and I just picked out ones that were were good for that. But that was something that I was surprised it could do such a good job. Um, Legalese to plain English. Again, this is sort of in the, it doesn't have to be marketing copy, but a lot of times lawyers are explaining very complicated legal concepts to clients or to the public. And this is a prompt that you can use for that, where basically maybe you're trying to, you're getting ready to explain a Supreme Court case that just came out, and you have you want to, the law is rather complicated, and you're trying to figure out how to explain it in a hitting key point. So that's a prompt that you can use for that. Um, Recommendation letter writer. So we all have to do it at some point or another. And it is it's sometimes something that a lot of people are procrastinators on because you have a lot of other things going on. But this is a prompt that will be hopefully helpful. But basically, it gives the brackets again are the things that you need to substitute in. Um, but it's if you're sort of like struggling to figure out how to get something decent, especially for somebody who really want to give a good recommendation letter for, this prompt will hopefully help you with that. Reviewing resumes. So this is sort of the, I guess the opposite. I mean, it's sort of a cousin of the last one, but in a lot of cases, you are advertising for an attorney or a paralegal or whatever that position that you're hiring for. You have a lot of resumes that are coming in, and you want a tool that can help you sort of cut through and find the best people. So in this case, with ChatGPT, depending on the version you have, you would upload the resumes in a single file. Then you would basically tell it to analyze the resumes for candidates applying for the position. And you're going to have to give it certain key, you're going to have to give it the title as well as from the job posting, what the key qualifications and skills that were required in the job. And then you can get a report on the resumes that you've uploaded based on comparing them to each other, and you can get more elaborate and tell it to do scoring systems and things like that. But that's something that may be helpful. Somebody just informed me though. I haven't done this personally, but you need to actually also make sure in your state law that there are some rules in a few states now on using AI for screening resumes for jobs. So just make sure that you're aware of what your state's rules are on this, or discrimination rules, etc. Anonymization. So a lot of times you have a document that you want to put in something public facing, and there's personally identifying information in there that you want to get rid of. This is a prompt that can help you with that. But basically telling it to go into that prompt, and you can tell it to make up names. You could tell it to put brackets, or anything like that. But this is the tool that's a lot faster than the manual way of handling the task. So that's this is a prompt that you obviously can customize. But if it's something that you have to do on a regular basis, redacting, it's a faster way to, you can obviously redact in Adobe and other tools like that, but this is a way that you can potentially use AI to help you along the way with that. Tutor or coach. I actually use this one a lot for personal tasks. This is one that you can actually and I wanted also to show this because of the interactive elements on it. But let's say I've used it for fitness and nutrition coach. I've used it for language coaching on there. If you're trying to get into computer coding from scratch, you can pick any subject that you're interested in, and you can ask it to actually design a whole course for you. and then you can actually tell it, working off of this prompt, to start the process and you're interacting with it. So it'll ask you questions like in language tutor, for example. It will give its lesson and then it will ask you at the end questions. And then you answer them and then it will tell you, it'll interact with you. So you can do that in a bunch of different areas. For the coaching, for fitness coaching as well, it'll tell you this is what you're supposed to do this day. And then you go in and say, okay, I did this. These are where the problems were, et cetera. And it will actually give you feedback on there. So it's a pretty interesting, there's some pretty interesting use cases you can use it for if you're looking for that kind of thing. Um, Drafting. So this one is I had and there's a lot of potential ways. I mean, I've already discussed some examples of things you can use for drafting, but really what I'm talking here about is the complex drafting that lawyers do, whether it's producing a legal brief or in our case, in immigration law, we have to produce these petition letters that may be a 10, 15, 20 page document that we're sending to the government outlining why a client qualifies for a particular immigration benefit. Those are, obviously there's a tremendous amount of possibility as far as saving time and potentially saving a lot of money and it works really great. I mean, you can get philosophical issues about whether it makes sense to bill by the hour anymore when you have these kinds of tools available, especially as they get a lot better. But I did want to mention in there that they sort of have some limitations, and this is why you might want to, think through which tools you're using. One is that obviously you need to think about legal ethics. So some of these tools, like the free version of ChatGPT, you may be training their language model, which means information that you're putting into the prompt may work its way into ChatGPT and somebody else's answer. Obviously, that's a problem. Also, sometimes there are human examiners at companies like ChatGPT that will have that they will review certain posts because they might be violating a policy. A lot of times, lawyers are discussing sensitive topics in their documents, immigration lawyers that do asylum, for example, or criminal lawyers. So you need to, you need to be very cognizant about who can see information you're putting into that you're putting into a model. So you need to be careful about which tools you're actually using. And then also keep in mind with those token limits that I was mentioning before, that sometimes you have difficulty getting the depth and length of the document that you really need. So, you might produce it section by section with different prompts. You could use a tool like NetDocuments Pattern Builder, which is a it builds on a you basically build an interview, you upload documents along the way, and then it will behind the scenes create that multi-prompt setup and then generate a much richer, longer, better document than you would just get out of a public language model on there. But drafting, I think, is the part that's going to change our profession more than anything in the next couple of years. Legal research and all that is great for in terms of especially with the good tools. But I really think it's on the drafting side that lawyers are going to probably be using these tools more and more. Due diligence, e-discovery. There are tools there's a lot of generative AI that's working its way into the big e-discovery software platforms and due diligence platforms. But if you're just doing it sort of on if you're not using those software products and you're doing the DIY approach on these things, you can, use these generative AI tools to help you, for example, summarize all the documents that you're feeding into it, looking for sort of those needle in a haystack issues that may be in a particular document. I wouldn't recommend, abandoning human review. In fact, you have the ethical obligation to really closely monitor the output of these tools, but they can be quite good at finding things that you might miss just because of basic human error. They're also really getting better, these tools, as far as handwriting recognition and being able to handle bad photocopies. Um, so it's that's one of the nice things about them, compared to tools that, just a few years ago, handwriting recognition was extremely difficult, for AI tools to use, and now they've gotten quite better. Um, okay, interview your data. I didn't really know how to title this slide, but basically the idea is that if you have a set of data, maybe it's a report from your case management system, maybe it's a government report with a lot of data in it, and you are trying to get insights into that data, or basically, just asking questions in natural language questions to figure out what the data is actually saying. It can be quite helpful in that regard. And this is a sample prompt that you could use, say, for a case management report, that you exported from your system to try and get better insights into your practice. Um, Obviously, you could use it for any kind of thing, but I just wanted to raise the point that, when you upload things, it can be spreadsheets, it can be all kinds of data, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be a text document, that you're asking questions about. Um, a lot of you are probably using, I mean, you're here today. You have a Zoom account. You may be using Teams, but a lot of times lawyers are. You may be seeing more and more of these in Zoom chats that that you're going in, where there's an AI note taker, that's in there, and the note takers is, you may be curious about what they actually do. They've been around for several years, and before they were using generative AI, they were still doing. I mean, Otter. Well, they were using AI for quite some time, and they were producing things like precise transcripts. Um, but with the generative AI tools that have now been integrated into products like, well, Zoom has their own, Firefly. We use Read.ai at our law firm on there, but they can do a lot of other things, including summarizing meetings, which is really great if you don't want to pour through a transcript. You just kind of want to get the gist of what you discussed in that particular meeting. And then finding action items of who said what in the meeting that they were going to do. That can help you a lot of times figure out, after a meeting's over, what your action items are. And it also does a pretty good job now with voice recognition, and knowing who's speaking, and who's supposed to be doing what. So it'll tell you exactly at the end. Greg said he was going to do this. Bob said he was going to do this, and it can do that with with that voice recognition capability. One thing that we are using it for at our firm is in initial consultations we do by Zoom, and which is most of them. Um, we, with the client's permission, will record the program, and with the AI tool, um, very helpful, especially if you're delegating a task onto paralegals and other lawyers. But also our clients themselves are asking for for us to share, share the report with them, which has all of these things. And that's, I think, helping us do a better job for our clients, because they have a better understanding of what we told them we were going to be doing, what their responsibilities are. And it's it just basically helps to ensure everybody's on the same page. So I really love those tools, and recommend it. Do read the terms of service with these tools, and make sure that you're, for example, not training their language models, and that they are with the data that's coming out of your recordings. Zoom got into trouble with that some point last year, and after some very large law firms announced, and some healthcare systems announced that they were going to be moving to a different product. Zoom quickly changed their terms of service on that. But that is something that's sort of a tip for any of these, is always make sure that you read the terms of service. And by the way, you can put the terms of service themselves into ChatGPT, where it can, and ask it questions like, are there things in there that should concern me as far as my private, as far as preserving my confidentiality of my data and all that? It does a really good job. Maybe you wouldn't think that it's self-aware. It's not. I mean, I'm anthropomorphic. Well, you know what I'm talking about. But basically, these tools can be quite good at being able to find problems with the tools themselves. Um, Case management materials. This is one that you probably haven't thought of, but you can, in a particular practice area, you can use these tools to help you come up with all kinds of things to help you maybe more give. If you're not using a fully fleshed out case management system for your practice area, these tools can be really helpful in helping you come up with checklists and intake forms and questionnaire forms and process flows, etc. So that's something that you can use to develop those sets of materials. I have this sort of divided. The prompt is really kind of long that you could use for this, but the example. Sometimes it's a good idea to put an example of what you want it to do in the end, to help it figure out how to structure the document that it's going to be producing in the way that you want. And that's why I included a second page for this one. Legal ethics. So this is one that I think a lot of people probably wouldn't. I guess lawyers are thinking like all the ethical implications of using these tools, but actually it's quite good at just answering sort of basic legal ethics questions. So one of the things that we developed for our product for immigration lawyers is there's this 700-page. Our content partner is the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and they publish an extensive ethics compendium, they call it, for immigration law. And it's like, I think 700 or 800 pages, and gets into a lot of depth as far as how the different rules apply to immigration law scenarios. Um, I have that uploaded, as well as, say, for example, in my state, Tennessee, the Tennessee Rules of Professional Conduct, and then our state gave us permission to include our state's ethics opinions in our AI. So I have a prompt that's set up where you can give a hypothetical fact pattern, and then you're limiting the answers to that treatise, as well as the state ethics rules and the ethics opinions. But you can do this on your own, just with the ethics rules in your state, and maybe the ethics opinions, depending on whether they make them available for members, and put in a fact pattern, and see how it does on there. But it usually, gives a pretty good answer, and it'll also cite to you can tell it in the prompt to cite to the specific rule that you're asking it, that it's citing, that it's using to inform the answer. Um, I know a lot of lawyers. I've actually talked to, I presented in May to the ABA Center for Professional Responsibility, which was a room of about 500 ethics specialists, and it was a little intimidating to be on the stage talking about this kind of stuff. But I did talk to a lot of them in the halls, and they said that every state has a hotline that lawyers can call, and a lot of lawyers do not call the hotline for various reasons, and it's a source of frustration for these boards. And also, some of these states have trouble with manning the hotlines. They have to recruit volunteer lawyers to do it, and it's not always that easy. The idea here is that lawyers, instead of just sort of winging it, that at least they'll have the ability to ask and sort of go through. They'll know what ethics rules are raised, and kind of can see through the analysis here and read the rules themselves, and hopefully get to a better place than they would if they're not going to be calling the state boards in the first place. But anyway, that might be something that is interesting to some of you. Um, AI is also, it's not really a use case directly, but it is on there. This is just a sampling of a dozen products that I'm guessing that for most of you, that there is excuse this extraneous comments that are in the slide. I'll fix it. But, just some products that a lot of lawyers happen to use. And they all have generative AI features that are built in now. Some of them are more robust in that regard than others and can do more things. But it's the idea here is that you are probably already using software that is incorporating some of this functionality into it. And it's a, you might want to experiment with that. A lot of you probably have already are thinking about Microsoft Copilot. It is, I think, $30 a month, extra, on top of it, but it can be, if you want to use these kinds of tools, for example, within Outlook or within, a Word, or I used Copilot extensively for this slide deck as far as helping me come up with art. Some of the art that you're seeing came from Microsoft Copilot, and that's but it shows up in a lot of different places. So just expect to see more and more of that. Things like QuickBooks, I think, and Clio are really interesting in this regard because um, Clio, I did get to see a demo of that. I went to ClioCon last year, and it was pretty interesting on how you could ask. I was talking before about exporting a report for your case management system and uploading it and getting insights, but Clio is actually building some of that kind of functionality within the product itself, where you can get insights into your data, and that will improve more and more. So you may be able to get more and more insights into like strategies and all kinds of things from being able to pull information from the cases themselves. QuickBooks obviously is another one where if you're trying to really understand your economic performance, your financial performance, having those kinds of capabilities there can be something that could be pretty helpful. ChatGPT plugins is also another one that's not per se a use case, because there's a million use cases that come from ChatGPT plugins. But basically what I'm talking about here, um, within ChatGPT, you now have the ability to link it up with other tools, so that it can pull data, for example, from specialized data sets. It can perform certain kinds of tasks that it won't do as well with the tool. So, for example, one thing that the struggles with ChatGPT is sometimes map on there. Um, and there's a plugin called Wolfram Alpha, which is a database site, and has lots of interesting data reports in there. It, I gave just a couple of examples here. There are thousands of they call them GPTs now. I don't think they call them plugins anymore. But if you go into ChatGPT, um, there's a link in there where you can actually see a sort of a running catalog of productivity tools and all sorts of other categories that it has available. But the one that probably will use the most is the web browser connection. So ChatGPT, one of the limitations that it has on its own is it's only combed the web up until about a year and a half ago, so it won't be that great for current things. But with a web plugin, you can ask it things, ask it to do tasks based on things that have only come up recently. Dolly, by the way, I do have a slide on this later on, but that's that's the plugin that is their their illustration tool. So just go and explore some of those, and you might find that some of them can be quite helpful. RFPs. I don't know how many of you are in law firms that get requests for proposals. Depends obviously on the kind of practice that you're in. Our firm does, and we've started developing prompts that are helping us to more quickly turn around proposal requests from companies or institutions like universities, and also um, not just more quickly turn them around, but take a lot of the workload off of us as far as the drafting. So this is an RFP response prompt that I've created that will give a rough idea, but basically the idea here is that you upload the RFP, and then you can, within the prompt, it can tell you, and you can tell it to be interactive and interview you as far as collecting information that it needs. And then you can ask it to section by section start generating the response text for you. But it is something I think that a lot of firms can think about as far as how to, especially if you get these proposals regularly, these request proposals, um, re- request for proposals that you should, you should think about using a tool like this, maybe to help you be a little less burdensome as far as responding. Expert witness. That's one that I actually needed recently to help one of our lawyers in one of their cases, and we did it in Google's Google's product, um, thinking that it had access to sort of a wider data set and would be a little bit more current. But I think you can do this in ChatGPT a lot more easily than you used to as well. But this was just an example of the kind of expert that we needed to help us on a particular case. Um, so you can the point here is that you can sort of give it a natural language request for what you're looking for in a way and get an answer that might be a lot more on the mark than you would with just Google searching, which is probably how a lot of you have been taking on a task like that before. Which one are we on? Number 26. Oh, we're doing good on time on there. And I'll have maybe a couple of bonus tips for you if we run through all of these. Biography writer. Um, I'm sure you have at one point or another. I mean, if you have a LinkedIn profile, if you have to provide bios, for where you have speaking opportunities, etc. Um, and a lot of cases you have word limits. It can be a chore to do that. Um, and this is just more of a technique than a prompt itself, as far as how you might approach using a tool like this. But basically, if a lot of us will keep our LinkedIn profile about as up to date as anything that we have. And there is a way that you can export your LinkedIn profile into a PDF document. You can go in and find that in LinkedIn. There's ways to do that. You can also just screenshot your bio in LinkedIn if you needed to, or you could cut and paste it into another kind of document. Doesn't matter how you do it, but if you can get that, you can upload that into one of these language models like ChatGPT, and you can then tell it what kind of bio you want. Give you a Wikipedia style article about yourself. You could tell it to give you a more extensive one or a shorter one. You can also ask it to give you suggestions for ways that you might improve your LinkedIn profile to be, to do a better job. You can use it to draft the biography of yourself that's on your law firm's website, using that kind of stuff. But it is something that is it's a nice aid as far as working on that kind of project. Okay, prompt engineering. So this one is it may surprise some of you. That's like, I thought that's you need to always have somebody give me a good prompt, or I have to come up with it myself. But the best prompt engineer that I know is actually ChatGPT, where you just tell it the task that you're wanting it to do, and then asking it to draft something for you. And this is the prompt I have when I want ChatGPT to write me a better prompt than I could come up with on my own. Um, and it has brackets that you can fill in. Now, obviously, I've showed you some that don't require a whole lot of detail, and you don't really need, I think, in those cases, like summarization, to have a very elaborate prompt. But it may be that the task that you're trying to have it help you with is more complicated. So, for example, we were using ChatGPT to help us at our law firm to, develop. We were doing retreats and trying to develop a strategic plan for the firm. And we used a prompt like this to help us as far as drafting that plan. And along the way, of course, of the day of exercises and all that, we were then focusing on the individual sections of that plan, and it was giving us a lot of helpful suggested language along the way. But the point on this slide is that you are In a lot of cases, if you don't know how to write a good prompt for what you're trying to do, don't worry. Ask the AI to give you some assistance in that regard, and you'll be surprised in a lot of cases of how good it is. And then after you try it out, if it's not giving you really kind of the output you were hoping, then you can go back and tell it to, like, drop me another prompt this time and focus on this, or I don't want, on this, but after you've tried it out, you should be able to get a better result. Okay. Creating company policies. So I have been using this use case for quite some time. Um, our AI use policy that our firm has, I developed that spring of last year, um, and started with started. I think I actually had the practice management prompt help me, the one I showed you earlier, with coming up with a initial um, issue, list of things to discover. But I mean, that you wanted to have the prompt do. But the this can be quite good for any, any kind. So I have here a just one that produced a pretty good document. We needed to have a dress code, for we were looking at revisiting that. And we were trying to figure out how to come up with a dress code policy, and it did a pretty nice job with just this language and the prompt for what we ended up eventually using. Um, the AI use case prompt, by the way, if anybody wants to see our use policy, I'm happy to email it to you. And you can see it has, among other things, aside from sort of having the introduction for employees of, what these tools do, what are the prohibitions and the legal ethics. We also have a training module that it created that was tied to the policy. That's about an hour long, that broke it down, basically in 5-minute increments on what we were going to be doing over the course of the hour and what we had to teach. But just send me a note and I can send you that use policy if you don't have one in your firm, which I would highly recommend that you do. Okay, next. Creating images. So I've done some with this. I actually have asked developed a series of images on examples of immigrants in America, and I asked it to do it in a Pixar style. I used Dolly, which is OpenAI's image generation tool. Um, but the course of usually I'm really just pretty given pretty basic instructions on, it's like, make me, literally that would have been the image. But you may have seen some of these these generators that I mean, some of these AI generated art that are really good and really, and you may sort of, and then you try it out and it looks like garbage on what you were. Maybe it's okay, but um, I I actually asked ChatGPT to help come up with a list of things that you do to, basically elements that you could say in the prompt that might get you a better image than what you might do on your own. So maybe you're trying to come up with a new logo idea for your firm, or you're trying to come up with illustrations for a blog post, or whatever it is that you're doing. Um, these are things that you can describe in your prompt for what you're looking at, to hopefully get you a better idea. And for me, I'm not at all artistic, so I wouldn't even think about half of these issues. But with at least with these prompts, um, or these questions that are here, you might be able to get a better version of a document. I mean, the version of the image than you would otherwise if you just say, "Drop me a picture of a kid throwing a baseball," or something like that, and you never know what you're going to get. Um, the last one is sort of like a fun tip, but it's one that I just had a lot. My wife and I, we just had our big anniversary. We married 30 years. We took a trip to Greece, um, and I I didn't want to be carrying around guidebooks or trying to sift through them. But I had my phone, and we used ChatGPT fairly extensively in the course of that trip to help us along the way. So some of the things that it was doing that were pretty cool, like I would say, we're staying at the ABC hotel in Athens or whatever city it was in. We want a 3 to 4 hour walking tour from our hotel. Um, and we wanted to emphasize history or shopping or whatever. One day it was like 100 degrees and we just said, find some indoor activities along the way. We asked it to suggest restaurants. And then we told her what kinds of cuisine that we liked, and there was a vegetarian in the group, and we talked about we asked it to find places that had good vegetarian selections. So anyway, the idea is that it's basically like having your concierge in your phone along the way designing all this stuff. I've asked it to on that tour. I asked it to design. I'm a runner, and asked it to design some running trails and running routes for me in different places where I would have interesting things to look at. And I'm leaving from this location, and I want to run this particular distance. But it's just did a really nice job on that. You can as well ask it Bob questions. So we would see, for example, a statue or something like that that it told us to look at, and then we would ask it to give us, and with the mobile version of this, you can just ask with your microphone to give us more details and explain to us a little bit more about what we were looking at or why it was significant on there. So it is a really good travel companion. And I would recommend trying it out for that. So that actually is the end of the prepared slides. I did want to maybe talk a little bit about the tools that we're using in our practice. I don't know if I need to wrap it. I mean, if I know you wanted me to go for 60 minutes on there, I can start taking questions or I can continue on. You tell me what you want.
Yeah, it's up to you. If you've got a few more insights that you'd like to share, that's wonderful.
Tell people, so some people are like, all right, where do I start with which tools do I use or how do I do this? um ChatGPT is one of probably about a half a dozen of major ones that are out there as far as public language models. um Google has theirs. It's called Gemini. Gemini is incorporated into their browser, but you can also say gemini.google.com. Meta has theirs. Um, X, Elon Musk's former Twitter, has a product called Grok. And then there's Microsoft has Bing's has a AI product, and then there are some smaller companies. Claude is one that scores really well right now in some of in some of the um, boards that actually measure performance. Claude, I think, is owned 25% by Amazon, so they actually have some decent money behind them. Perplexity, there's a couple of these smaller companies, some of which are pretty good on there, and then Mistral is a French company, but some of them charge, some of them are free. Keep in mind that sometimes paying the $20 or $30 a month fee get you some things that you might be really, that might be really important for a lawyer. One of which is privacy on there. So some of these tools, if you get the paid version, you have they're not training their models, and you can keep your chats with them private. Some of them unlock certain features. Some of them have their higher performing models in the pay version of it, so you'll get better answers. But $20 to $30 a month seems to be sort of the typical price that you would be paying for a public language model. The legal specific tools can be quite a bit more. I think you're looking at if you're looking at a co-counsel which is from Casetext, which is now owned by West, you're probably looking at north of $400 or $500 a month per user. Some of the tools are less than that, but keep in mind, the more specialized the tools, the more you're going to be paying for what you're using it for. So I'll stop there. And I think we can get into questions. I don't know if there are, and if anybody has sort of any super interesting use cases, we can share them in the questions as well. And I'm looking now. Okay, we already have 5 on here. So um, in the example of anonymization, is it a confidentiality breach to upload sensitive information into GPT to begin with? So the answer on that is it could be an ethics breach to upload a document. It depends on, again, what the terms of service are on the tool that you're using, and what it can do with that data. So um, if you are using, if you're using one of these tools for anonymization, like I think actually CoCounsel has the ability to do this. We have the ability to do that in our product, but basically you have to check the model. It could be a serious violation on there if you're uploading really sensitive information, and that information is all training its model on there. There's really no point in anonymization in that case if you're basically sharing all that data. So it's a good question, and it is one that I think is going to depend on the product that you're using on there. But that's when you have to, any of these tools, you have to be really sensitive to what it does with your data and what kind of protections you have as far as putting in confidential data. Um, I'm interested in how you input these documents. Do you upload PDFs into ChatGPT? What are the options in more detail, please? So this one was Stephen Tower. So it really kind of depends on, first of all, it depends on what kind of document you're uploading. So if it's a document that you don't really care about confidentiality, like you just gotten a court case that was published on the court's website, and you are you can go into ChatGPT, for example, and upload. Well, maybe you'll hit the token limits on it, so it might not be the best example. But you're uploading that document. You don't really care about confidentiality because there's no client information or anything that is producing for you. So that might be a tool you can use for that. Adobe Acrobat Pro is one of the products that I was talking about before, which now have generative AI features. Um, and you have a lot of law firms are using Adobe Acrobat, and obviously in the Acrobat cloud, there are a lot of protections on privacy of data that the law firms are posting into the cloud. So that might be an example of what you can use to upload a PDF and be able to get those kind of answers that you would want with generative AI, or you can use a legal specific tool on there. So, like I said, Lexis and CoCounsel, I'm pretty sure have both. I know CoCounsel has the ability to upload PDFs and have it do summarizations. And like I said, there are other products in legal that are out there, including ours. But that's the answer on that is you have a number of choices that you can use. Your factors are going to be, do they protect confidentiality, and can they handle a larger document on there if it is a larger document? So that's a couple things to keep in mind. Also, what is it that you're doing? So sometimes you're uploading a document, a PDF. Are you just trying to summarize it, or actually are you performing tasks on it, like trying to get analysis out of it or have it do certain things? So um, it's going, the tool you're using may make a difference on depending on the task you're trying to accomplish. Okay. Somebody asked, some prompts included client names. Is there an issue with confidentiality or data security in putting client names? So kind of, again, the same theme. It could be an issue depending on which tool you're using, but you definitely need to, if you're planning on using these for client related tasks in your law firm, you need to be using tools that that are specifically designed to preserve confidentiality on there. And if it's not obvious to you, like it's not obvious in the terms of service, you need to be really careful on there. But there are tools. There are a lot of law firms and a lot of law firms that have chief ethics officers and all kinds of people like that that are using these kinds of tools, and they are tools that will satisfy those issues. And then there are some that you should be really careful about on there. So ChatGPT, by the way, there's like 5 different versions of ChatGPT with different levels of data security and data privacy in there. And so you should know which version of ChatGPT you're looking at. I actually, and not in this presentation, I have in another one, kind of an illustration of what each version of ChatGPT does as far as client confidentiality goes. So if anybody is not really sure about, that they want that slide, I'm happy to send that as well. Just ask me by email and I'll send it to you. So next question I have is, how do AI tools that are currently available compare to traditional research methods in terms of accuracy and efficiency? Um, it's a fair question and a good question on there. So they each kind of have their strength. Um, for an AI, I mean, for sort of I guess the traditional legal research, online legal research tools, those are probably better from a browsing perspective. For example, if you sort of like know what you're just looking to, like you were going to a library and you know what you were looking for and you were just trying to find what you're looking for and get the precise text. I think those tools can be better for that. Those tools also are not going to hallucinate, but they have a different problem with the traditional tools. Hallucinating being like making, like giving you an inaccurate answer or putting something in a legal memo that is producing for you that may not be the best answer on there. So the problem that the traditional tools have is that they oftentimes will give you three or 400 response, like hits on a particular search. And it can be really difficult to find what you're looking for because you haven't given it the precise keywords or the precise language that it's looking for. In which case you may end up, and you may end up also sort of being misled by the online research as well, where you did not do a good job in terms of shaping the Boolean search that you're doing. And may not be getting the best answer. So I think if, in an ideal world, I think people now are sort of romanticizing a little bit of that traditional legal research that it's always been so good. But if you've been using it for a lot of years, um, you'll get a lot of garbage responses with traditional legal research, and you'll waste a lot of time with that. So that's not perfect either. I think with generative AI, it my preference is to is to use a generative AI product because in a lot of cases I will find in the citations, even if I don't trust anything that I'm getting out of generative AI as far as being accurate, but it usually puts me on the right track as far as getting an answer almost instantly. And I'll look in the citations, and then once I start looking at cited documents, I'll have a much better handle on the topic than I did before, and it's just a lot faster and easier to get to that point. Um, so I would say that, you should think about using both sets of tools depending on the circumstance of what you're trying to do. I do think actually I can just tell you from our own experience of designing a legal research tool, albeit in the immigration space, um, that we had because we did this with the American Immigration Lawyers Association, there was about 40 immigration lawyers that they had recruited that were essentially giving us feedback on answers as it was coming in. And we did a lot of tweaking to the prompts to get better and better responses. We made a lot of adjustment. We had to add in a lot of content that in areas where we were a little bit weaker to improve things. We ended up, I think, at the end of the day, and we also had a score set up where until we got to a certain score, as far as like we did it 0 for completely wrong, point 0.5 if it was sort of right, but either incomplete or maybe had some elements that weren't the best, and then 1 for a great answer on there. And we were not going to release the product until we had at least on average a point 0.8, and now we're at over a point 0.9. Now I tell people, because every once in a while I have an immigration lawyer, that'll come up to me and say, love the product. It did get this one question wrong on there, and I'm like, well, I said, we know that's going to happen 1 out of 10 times that would they the product that the answer is not going to be great, and which is why you still have to be the lawyer. And I'll tell people, all that in any of the research products they're using, whether it's traditional or AI, is that you still have to be the lawyer. You still have to read the cases that it's presenting. You still have to do that analysis that is what your clients are expecting of you. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm trying to see where I am in the questions. What steps should a law firm take to develop and implement an AI use policy that ensures compliance? Can I do a share of my AI use policy? I'm going to do that real fast because I think it might be helpful for people to see that. So let me pull that document up and then I'll share it in a second. Okay. Do you see?
Yep.
Okay. So this is our AI use policy. At the beginning of it, it's sort of like it just explains, what that we've introduced ChatGPT and why we're using it and what the purpose of it is. Then it sets, sort of out the scope. But then we explain to people that they're going to have to go through a training if they're going to use the tech in the office, and we kind of tell them what we're going to be training them on. Then we list out the appropriate uses that they can use it for, and then the things that would be prohibited on there, which should be obvious on there about some of this stuff, but maybe not necessarily to everybody. And then the explaining to them that about hallucinations and not relying on anything that they get too closely in there. And then we talk about data security, liability, sort of all the scary things that we want people to be thinking about before they're using these tools. And then letting them know that we are monitoring how it's being used at the in there, so that I think people sort of understand that there's that's something that, and then also letting them know that the technology is changing a lot, and we will probably come back and review and make changes to this policy more so than we might on other kinds of policies that are out there. And then this is the training hour that I was describing before about how much time we spend on each of the topics on there, but it just sort of makes it easy for the person in the office who's going to be doing the training to understand what topics are going to be covered. A list of the materials and resources that the paralegal or the attorney or whoever's taking the course is going to get, and what's attached to the policy, and then how we're going to be following up. So that is that's the RAI use policy. Like I said, I'll send it to anybody that wants it, but that's a one that I think covers a lot of ground in there, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback. I shared this with a lot of firms that are using something, a version of this in their practices. So I think it hits a lot of the topics. Somebody asked me a question on AI tools, what I would recommend for optimizing time management and scheduling. So this is like my biggest frustration with Microsoft Copilot, is what I was really hoping Copilot could do, is do a lot more with the Outlook calendar on there. And it doesn't seem to do much on the calendar side. It does a good job. It's like summarizing emails and helping you draft emails and all that. What I would like, and I don't know, Google has sort of figured this out on their version of calendar. What I'm hoping will be happening, in the near future, is that you can have basically, if you get an email from a client and you need to, go, is what I'd like is that you can just basically say, let's schedule a meeting. I'm available next week. And then have since you're comprising that response in Microsoft and it can see your calendar, to have it actually take the next, is to take the steps of showing you maybe on the right hand of like all the spots that are available in your calendar, and then maybe clicking on it and having the automatically sending a calendar invite attached to the email response or that kind of thing. The answer is I'm not aware of anybody that's doing a good job in that right now. But I feel your pain if that's what you're hoping that you're going to be able to get out of it, because I would like to get that functionality and I don't have it yet, as far as that goes. But, Somebody's asking a specific question about, I guess it's copyright, on here. So it is that's a fair question to ask regarding copyright, and you need to kind of pay attention right now to, I'm not aware of any, suits against an end user. Um, but it seems to be the suits that are out there. The New York Times has a suit that they have filed. Sarah Silverman, the comedian, has a suit she's filed. And there's some others that are out there where they are suing the language models. Um, and but it is a fluid area as far as that goes. And I would say that I think you sort of have to. Right at this point, I'm not aware of anybody who's gotten into trouble for on the drafting side. I think it's been more on music and on art that it seems like right now but it is something to stay on top of as far as this litigation goes. Um, that New York Times suit has been out for quite a while. There have also been some I think in the Wall Street Journal and News Corp just signed, I think, I forget how many millions of dollars, like a $20 million agreement with, maybe it was OpenAI. I can't remember if it was OpenAI or Google, to allow for their content to basically train. And what's happening is that some of these big content providers are getting paid substantial money to give their data to help train the AI, and then the AI tools are also then featuring that content in their answers. So it's sort of a good from both a financial point of view for the content provider, as well as also getting people to go onto their sites, for example. Um, but that's something I would say that it's a good question, and stay tuned. I would guess that if the courts start hammering people on that Congress will step in, because I think at this point, kind of like, you may remember e-commerce from back in the day when it started. You didn't pay sales tax probably for the good first 5 or 8 or 10 years that people were buying stuff on Amazon and those kind of places. And that was deliberate policy to kind of foster and make sure that these technologies would be allowed to develop. I would guess that if there start to be, serious copyright enforcement that's reaching the users or making these products not work as well, that Congress is probably going to provide some protections in that regard. But that's just my guess. Somebody asked a question: are there any tools that are good at reviewing documents that were photocopied, such as IEPs from school districts? Um, So, like I said, that's one of the that's one of the things that's gotten a lot better in these tools since November 2022, when GPT 3.5 was released. The newer ones um, do a very good job on there. First, what they will do is they will do convert to digital text, and then it will start answering questions from that. But I've personally done a lot of experimenting with that. I have a lot of family tree documents and things like that are poor quality documents. That also, some of them are handwritten in language, in sort of about 18th century or 19th century's fanciful writing and all that, and it would be hard. I have trouble even understanding it, looking at it myself, but it does quite a good job. I think one of the things that made the biggest impression on me in that respect was when GPT-4 was released last spring, in one of the demo videos that OpenAI did, somebody designed a website on the back of a napkin just with a pen, and they just kind of like designed what they wanted it to look like. Then they took a picture of it with their phone and uploaded the image, and it was able to take that and design it. So it is it it is a much higher level than what we've seen in the past as far as image recognition from programs that we at our law firm. We've been almost finished with this 5-year project where we were at 30 years of files that we were digitizing so that we can destroy the paper files. And we had 900 boxes of files that were at an outside storage facility. And I can tell you that we had OCR, and it wasn't great. but it was good. I mean, good enough on there that it figure things out. But in a lot of cases, it was far from perfect. These new tools, I think, are a lot better and have taken things to a much higher level. Um, where can you find a copy of the prompts that I use? So, Nina, how do they? I mean, I'm happy to email anybody my slides, but Nina, I think you said you guys are going to make them available. So, how does that work?
Yeah, so you can go to the webinar page that you use to register for today's presentation, and they will be available for download.
So you will have them. And yeah, I've been to plenty of presentations where I have my camera on, taking pictures of what I'm seeing on the screen and all that. So I know that's a pain in the neck. So you should have everything you need. If for some reason if I mention anything, um, that you have a document or anything like that, I'm happy to send it. I have also one I've been sending out to people, is sample language for your retainer agreement on disclosing to clients how you're using generative AI and having those conversations. I'm happy to send that. So just let me know and I'll hit reply and send you what you asked for.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your extra insight and your answering.
I appreciate it. Hopefully people found something helpful today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your additional insight and answering our audience questions. And thank you to everyone in our audience who did submit a question. We want to thank you for joining us for another Justia webinar. And as I mentioned at the top of today's presentation, just like that CLE credit, there are many benefits to upgrading to Justia Connect Pro. If you are a lawyer, it's available for you. You can go ahead and upgrade to get CLE credit on live and on-demand presentations, as well as getting additional features on your Justia Lawyer Directory profile and access to a $200 credit for select Justia marketing solutions. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to pro.justia.com. Thank you so much for your time, Greg. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.